Hello everyone. Welcome to StoicVibe channel. The worst people often look like they're winning, but life doesn't settle debts in public. It collects in silence. Stoics don't chase revenge. They observe, because while you're healing in peace, karma is already working, and it never misses. I know it feels unfair sometimes. You gave your all. You loved honestly. You stayed loyal in rooms where your name was being dragged, and somehow the ones who lied, ghosted, and betrayed seemed to be thriving, smiling, glowing, winning. But deep down, something doesn't add up, right? That's because what you're seeing is a mask, and karma isn't interested in masks. It's interested in truth. This video isn't about bitterness. It's about clarity. It's about knowing what's really going on behind the scenes when someone walks away from something real and pretends it never mattered. It's about the signs, the quiet, powerful ones, that someone is already dealing with the consequences of how they treated you, not in front of a crowd, but in the silence of their own life. The same silence that Stoic thinkers like Marcus Aurelius taught us to seek, not as weakness, but as wisdom. Because in that silence, the truth always speaks the loudest. If you value content like this, content that brings real healing, perspective, and power into your life, there's just one simple, free favor I'll ask. Hit that subscribe button. That way you won't miss a single drop of this insight we're building together. Let's get into it. They say healing is quiet, but scroll through your feed for 5 minutes and it seems like everyone's shouting about their new chapter. The very people who once lied to your face, dismissed your worth, or left without closure, they're the loudest ones online. Every post feels curated, every smile looks rehearsed. You see sunsets, smoothie bowls, spa days, and captions stuffed with words like peace, growth, and divine timing. And at first glance, it might get to you. It might make you question everything. Were they always this happy? Did they really just move on like that? Was I the only one hurting? But let's slow it down and be real. Because real peace doesn't need a press release. Real growth doesn't need a filter or a hashtag. The truth is, when someone's genuinely at peace, they don't feel the urge to prove it to anyone. They're not performing for the algorithm. They're just living quietly, fully, inwardly. That's something Stoics understood centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." In other words, if you're healed, you live like it. You don't need to convince the world. You embody it. But the ones who wronged you, the ones who caused real damage, they're the ones launching a full-on PR campaign right after the fallout. And why? Because something inside them is unsettled. That constant posting, that need to show how happy and unbothered they are, that's not strength. That's overcompensation. It's a subconscious way of saying, "Look at me. I'm okay. I didn't lose anything important." But they did, and deep down, they know it. This is where your power comes in. Don't let their performance pull you off center. Don't compare your quiet healing to their loud pretending. Remember, the louder someone screams, "I'm fine," the more they're likely not. Peace doesn't make noise. Insecurity does. And the moment you start chasing their highlight reel, you lose your grounding. Carl Jung once said, "Shame is a soul-eating emotion." And many people, especially those who cause harm and walk away from it, carry shame, whether they acknowledge it or not. That shame drives them to project an image that says, "I'm above it." But shame, like karma, is quiet. It lingers in the stillness, in the moments no one sees, and no amount of social media can drown it out. It's tempting to scroll and analyze every post. It's tempting to wonder if they've really changed, if they've upgraded, if they ever felt remorse. But don't give your peace away to a projection. Plato taught that the greatest victory is over oneself. Let that guide you. Your silence, your discipline, your ability to stay focused on your own lane, that is your strength. That's the Stoic way. Not to react, not to clap back, but to rise in quiet power. You don't need to prove you're healing. You don't need to explain that you're okay. Your presence, how you carry yourself, how you treat others, how deeply you move through the world, that says more than any quote ever will. Aristotle believed that we are what we repeatedly do. If you move with integrity, with self-respect, and with consistency, you don't need to prove a thing. You become the proof. So let them post. Let them pretend. Let them curate a version of reality that makes them feel less hollow. That's their business. But you stay grounded, stay intentional, stay still, even when the world is loud, because in that stillness, you grow. And nothing is louder than a healed soul that doesn't flinch when it sees the person who once broke it trying to act like they didn't. And one last thing, don't confuse their spotlight with success. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. Most people avoid reflection. They fill their time with noise, distraction, and image management. But not you. You've looked within. You've sat with your pain. You've done the hard inner work that no filter can fake. So the next time you see their posts, the next time you catch yourself scrolling and wondering, pause, breathe, remind yourself, peace doesn't post, it lives. And you're living it in silence, with strength. That's not weakness. That's growth. That's real evolution. Keep going. Let them market the fantasy while you build the reality. Life doesn't always explode when someone does wrong. Sometimes it just quietly unravels. Not with flames, but with empty spaces. A friend who used to laugh with them stopped replying. A job interview they felt good about never followed up. Their new relationship, the one they couldn't wait to post about, suddenly starts feeling hollow. Like they're holding hands with a stranger who doesn't see them. And the confusion begins to rise. On the outside, everything looks fine, but something feels off, and they don't know why. But you do. Because when you mistreat someone who showed up with an open heart, life doesn't always strike back in fury. It corrects, like nature restoring balance. It subtracts the very things they once took for granted. Your patience, your loyalty, the emotional depth you offered without keeping score are no longer available. Gone. And it's not just the absence of you. It's the absence of who they were when they had you. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And for people who've betrayed something real, that's the hard part. Looking in the mirror and realizing they pushed away someone who only ever wanted to see them grow. And the more they avoid that truth, the more life reflects it back, not as punishment, as awareness. At first, they don't notice it. The subtraction is subtle, a missed call here, a project falling through there. They chalk it up to bad timing or bad luck. But over time, the pattern becomes obvious. The connections they once had don't hold. The excitement they felt fades faster. They try to replace you with new friends, new lovers, new distractions, but it doesn't stick. Why? Because you weren't a placeholder. You were peace. You were presence. You were the grounding energy they didn't know they needed until it disappeared. Stoic philosophy teaches us that our role is not to control what happens to others, but to master ourselves. Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And while they react with confusion,
with a desperate search for new stimulation, you remain still, unshaken, because you know what they lost, even if they're just starting to sense it. Their world begins to feel unfamiliar. The emotional safety they felt with you, the one they never thank you for, has vanished. And now they look around and realize that the people they surround themselves with aren't deep. They're fun, maybe, they're shiny, exciting, momentarily entertaining, but they're not safe. They don't listen like you did. They don't understand their silence. They don't notice the small shifts in mood. And that lack of connection starts to wear on them. Plato once said, "We can forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light." And that's what this is, a fear of light, a fear of clarity. Because clarity means facing the fact that they had something pure, something real, and they threw it away like it was replaceable. But you weren't just another person. You were home. And now, no matter how many places they run to, no matter how many people they cling to, they can't find that same feeling. Because you weren't just offering attention. You were offering energy, sacred energy, the kind that can't be faked or replicated, the kind that doesn't come around twice. The Stoics believed in alignment with nature, with truth, with integrity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." When someone violates that inner truth, when they deceive, dismiss, or betray, they don't just damage the other person, they damage themselves. They separate from their own moral compass, and that disconnection becomes the root of their restlessness. So now their wins feel shallow, their victories taste bland. Even when life seems to offer them good things, there's an emptiness under the surface, because nothing feels whole when you're disconnected from who you were meant to be. And that version of themselves, the version that had access to your presence, your care, your forgiveness, is gone. And now, no amount of surface-level joy can replace it. Aristotle once said, "What is a friend? A single soul dwelling in two bodies." And what they lost wasn't just a partner, or a friend, or a lover. It was that soul connection, that space where they were seen without performance, heard without interruption, loved without condition. And now they know they won't find that again. Not easily, maybe not ever. That's karma, not as a lightning bolt, but as a quiet erosion, a slow fade of things they thought would always be there. You didn't slam the door, you just stopped opening it. And while they may not say it out loud, while they may keep pretending they're fine, the truth sits with them every night, in the silence, in the missed texts, in the moments when they realize the people around them only know the version of them that's still pretending. Let that be your peace. You don't have to fight. You don't have to argue. You don't have to post about it. You just have to stay grounded. Let life do what life does. It always circles back. And when it does, it's not there to punish. It's there to reveal. And this time, it's showing them everything they lost and everything they could have had if they'd only known how to treat it. Some truths don't need to be shouted to be heard. They echo quietly in actions, in patterns, in the things people don't say, but desperately want you to notice. You've seen it. The person who once disrespected your boundaries, played with your emotions, or walked away like you didn't matter.
Now, they're suddenly philosophical on social media, quoting betrayal, preaching about fake friends and protecting energy. They're sprinkling their feed with indirect shots that somehow always circle back to your story, even if they pretend it's not about you. No tags, no names, but you feel it. That's not growth, that's guilt, dressed in metaphor. It's a conscience trying to process what it's not ready to admit. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what's happening here. They can't bring themselves to face the truth head-on, so they dance around it. They talk in riddles, post vague wisdom, and hope the right person, you, sees it. And here's where it gets real. People who are truly at peace don't throw digital tantrums, wrapped in quotes. They don't need to perform healing. Real healing is quiet. It shows up in how you treat people, not in what you type on a screen. It's lived, not staged. That's something the Stoics understood deeply. Epictetus taught that we should live in such a way that if someone spoke ill of us, no one would believe it. That kind of character doesn't need hashtags, it needs presence. But what's happening here isn't presence, it's obsession. They're still tangled up in the story, but now you've stopped playing your part. That's why they're circling around you with these messages that scream your name without ever saying it. Because you've become a symbol in their mind, not just a person they hurt, but a reflection of who they were when they had you, and what they lost when they didn't value you. Plato believed that the soul remembers what the ego tries to forget, and what they're trying to forget, what they keep pushing into passive-aggressive captions, is the regret. They may not admit it, but their energy tells the truth their words never will. Meanwhile, you've gone quiet. You've let go, and that silence, it's loud, it's unsettling. To someone who expected chaos, they wanted a reaction, an argument, some kind of response to confirm that they still had emotional access to you, but you didn't give it to them. That's not weakness, that's mastery. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." You've become that revenge, not through spite, but through growth. By becoming the kind of person who doesn't chase closure, who doesn't clarify lies, who doesn't shrink just because someone else can't handle the truth. So let them post. Let them twist the narrative to feel better about themselves. Let them write poetry they hope you'll decode. Because all it does is prove they're still living in the past while you've moved forward. You don't need to prove anything. Not to them, not to anyone. Aristotle once said, "Character may almost be called the most effective means of persuasion." And your character, how you carry yourself without bitterness, how you stay composed without clapping back, that speaks volumes more than any post ever could. And this is where your real peace kicks in, not just in knowing you're free of their drama, but in knowing you didn't lose anything by walking away. They lost you. They lost access to someone who actually cared, and now they're left trying to write you back into their story through cryptic messages and half-healed quotes. But that's not your story anymore. You're not a character in their play. You're the author of your own piece. So stay silent, stay still, because your silence has become their mirror, and the longer they stare into it, the more they're forced to see themselves, not the version they present to the world, but the truth behind the filtered image. That's not cruelty, that's karma, and the beautiful part, you didn't have to lift a finger. There's a strange thing that happens to people after they damage someone who truly cared for them. At first, they act like it's nothing. They brush it off, laugh it off, move on fast, almost too fast. They say things like, "You're too emotional," or "You're too sensitive," like your ability to feel deeply was some kind of flaw. But give it time and watch closely. That same person who once mocked your vulnerability starts moving through life with a kind of quiet suspicion. They don't trust anyone, their friend group shrinks, their smiles tighten, and their relationships, they all start feeling unsafe. You see something shifted, but it didn't happen on the outside. It happened internally, like a fracture in the foundation. Because when you betray someone who was good to you, you don't just lose them, you lose your ability to trust what's good.
You can't recognize pure intentions anymore without wondering if there's a catch. Carl Jung explained this perfectly when he said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. And when you've crossed a line you never thought you would, your mind doesn't forget it. It starts projecting that same darkness onto everyone else. So now, every kind gesture feels suspicious. Every compliment comes with a side of doubt. They start assuming that everyone will lie the way they lied, ghost the way they ghosted, manipulate the way they did. Why? Because deep down they know what people are capable of, because they've seen it in themselves. This is one of karma's quietest punishments. It doesn't always show up in chaos or conflict. Sometimes it just shows up in the way your inner world begins to erode. Slowly, subtly, like water wearing down stone. What was once a confident stride becomes guarded. What was once laughter becomes calculation. And before they even realize it, they're building walls, not to keep people out, but to keep their guilt from seeping through. Aristotle once said, knowing thyself is the beginning of wisdom, and when someone walks away from wisdom, all that's left is confusion within them, around them, and eventually reflected back at them. That's the real cost of betrayal, not the moment of walking away, but everything that follows when the noise fades and the self is left unanswered.
There's a certain kind of lesson that life doesn't deliver in words, but in reflection. It doesn't arrive with warnings or bright neon signs. It shows up in the form of another person, someone who enters their life and at first feels like everything they thought they deserved. Beautiful, magnetic, enchanting. The chemistry is electric, the connection feels intense, but then the shift begins. Slowly, quietly, the texts take longer to come. The warmth disappears. Vulnerability is mocked. Love becomes a game. And suddenly, they're the ones left confused, hurt, and overthinking every little interaction. Sound familiar? That's not coincidence. That's karma in its most poetic form. Because karma, when it truly wants to teach, doesn't shout. It mirrors. It brings someone into their world who behaves just like they did, not to punish them, but to reflect them. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And when the reflection starts to sting, when the treatment starts to look a little too familiar, that's when the understanding begins, whether they want it or not. They used to mock your sensitivity, call you too emotional, say you were overthinking it. Now they're the ones lying awake at night wondering if they said too much, if they cared too soon, if they're being too intense. They used to roll their eyes at your honesty. Now they're craving honesty and getting indifference. That's not heartbreak. That's a shift in perspective. That's the same pain they caused coming back, not as revenge, but as education. The Stoics believed in living according to nature, and nature has a beautiful way of creating balance. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." They thought they could act without consequence, that they could mistreat someone who loved them deeply and keep moving forward untouched. But life has a rhythm, a pulse, and when you break that rhythm by betraying what's real, it eventually catches up. Not because the world is cruel, but because it's fair. Now they find themselves chasing something that keeps slipping away, someone who gives just enough to keep them hooked, but never enough to feel safe. They post things hoping for a reaction, and they get silence. They open up and they get mocked. They beg for clarity, and they're met with confusion. And that inner panic, that emotional whiplash, that's the exact experience they once handed to you. Plato once said, "Justice in the life and conduct of the state is possible only as first it resides in the hearts and souls of the citizens." And justice on the personal level works the same way. You don't always see it in public. You don't always get a front row seat.
but it always arrives internally, subtly, relentlessly. You may never hear them admit it. They might never say, "I did this" to someone once. But they'll feel it every time they overthink that unanswered message, every time they question their worth, every time they cry over someone who doesn't care the way they once didn't care. That realization doesn't need words. It lives in their silence. And here's the truth. They're not being punished. They're being shown. Life isn't out to get them. It's simply returning the energy they once put into the world. Socrates believed that the unexamined life isn't worth living, but not everyone has the courage to examine themselves until the mirror is too clear to ignore. And that's what this karmic connection is. A mirror. They wanted to believe they were untouchable, that they could hurt you and walk away unscathed. But pain has a way of circling back, not to harm, but to teach. Not to destroy, but to awaken. This isn't about revenge. This is about understanding. And for the first time, they're beginning to understand you. Because no matter how much they try to control the narrative, they can't control the feeling. The ache, the emptiness, the sense that something real was lost, that they were the reason it was lost. And now, no matter how many distractions they chase, there's a part of them that won't stop comparing every new connection to what they once had and didn't protect. Aristotle wrote, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And if mistreatment becomes a habit, life has a habit of delivering that same energy back. Eventually, it becomes undeniable. They aren't just being hurt, they're being reflected. And when they look into the eyes of someone who treats them like they treated you, there's nowhere left to hide. So let them meet their match. Let them taste the confusion they once served. Let them sit in the silence that used to echo in your heart. Because that's not punishment, that's the process. And if they choose to grow from it, great. If they don't, that's their path to walk. Yours is already miles ahead, clearer, lighter, and finally free from the burden of being the one who always had to feel too much. Let karma finish what it started, quietly, truthfully, completely. Sometimes the loudest justice is the one no one hears but them. You don't need to chase closure. You are the closure. Let life do what life does, and you keep your peace sacred. If this spoke to something you felt but couldn't put into words, there's another video waiting for you on screen that might be exactly what you need next. Thank you for walking this path with us here at Stoic Journal, where healing isn't loud, but it's always real. Until next time, stay grounded, stay still, and let your growth do the talking. Thank you for watching this videos. Good luck to everybody.